You're at 109 right now.
Also called Tokyo. So today I'm going to tell you three stories. I'm going to tell you three stories that occurred to me, right? Related to these numbers. So my buddy Jamal says I talk too much about Nipsey, but there's so much there. There's so much to unpack. There's so many stories to tell. There's so much. I mean, Nipsey was something else. So I'm going to talk about these three moments in my life, in my travels, whereby I have a connection. I made a connection between Nipsey and these numbers, 109. Boom, right? For real. Really quickly, I was in the Sultanate of Oman. Now, this is in the Middle East, right? This country borders Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, right? Oman. If you know it, then you know it. If not, check it out on your map and what have you. I was living there. I was working there, and I actually lived there for about six or 7 months. Okay. And in Oman, I lived in Oman during the time that Nipsey was murdered. So on the day that Nipsey was murdered, I lived in Oman, and I'm going to tell you what happened the day that Nipsey was murdered. About a week before Nipsey's, the incident where Nipsey was shot, I was riding high on Nipsey's success, and I was just like, man, this guy can do no wrong. He's the golden boy. Look at him. He's doing his thing. So the sudden news of his death, it just hit me like a ton of bricks, as I'm sure it did for, all of his fans all around the world. It was just sudden and just, devastating. Well, for me, I was in the desert, and I woke up one morning. It was a Monday morning. Now, remember that there's a time difference, right? Because the events that took place in Los Angeles, where I am right now, they were 11 hours behind, and that meant I was 11 hours ahead, right, in Oman. So things transpired around, I guess, 2 or 3 p.m. Los Angeles time. So 11 hours ahead, that was like around 1 in the morning in Oman. At that time, I was asleep. And so I woke up around 6 in the morning, and I usually get up and leave my home at 7:30 to go to work, to go to the school. So I was awake around 6 in the morning when I checked my Instagram feed. That was just my normal routine, my normal habit. And I noticed that there were so many Nipsey Hussle pictures, being uploaded from friends, that I thought, well, why is everyone, jocking Nipsey? And on one of these pictures, I noticed there were the caption read, "Prayers up for Nipsey. He was a really good dude." And so, reading in the past tense, it was like, yeah, that's when that's when the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, whoa, Nipsey's gone. And I remember I was laying in bed, looking at my phone, and like tears started to come to my eye because I was devastated. Like, just a week ago, I had read the Forbes magazine article about Nipsey and all of his successes, and I was like, man, this guy can do no wrong. He's the golden boy. He's doing it. Wow. And I was sticking my chest out in that foreign country, like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing my thing in my way, but I was proud to be connected, through the city of Los Angeles. Like, we're good. We're doing it. So anyhow, within an hour of waking up, getting that news, of course I was saddened, but I still had to go to work. I drove to work. It was a short distance, 5 minutes to 8 minute drive to get to work. However, something peculiar happened. There was a truck on the road. Now, mind you, there were only two cars on the road. It was my car and this truck. And it was very peculiar that this truck would end up cutting me off. Like, that's the rudest thing you could do. And like, in order to do that, like, I think that there would have to be more people on the road, and it'd have to be like a tight squeeze and all of this. But it wasn't. There were just two cars on the road, and we were entering a roundabout. We were entering a roundabout, and so I was slowing down to let this car on, and they weren't slowing down when we were coming to this point where we were going to meet. And the guy just he was just barreling down the road, and he didn't even care. He was just like, and he jumped in front of me. So he cut me off, and I was angry. So in one sense, I was very saddened by the news, and I was just like carrying that heavy weight on my way to work. And then in the next moment, the guy cuts me off, and I'm angry that this guy cut me off. I'm like, for no reason. I'm like, what the hell is this dude's problem? But then, like, a whole sense of just calmness washed over me, because I noticed that truck's license plate, the number was 1090. That's just how they write their not addresses, but their license plates in Oman. So I saw those numbers, 1090, and I thought, man, what a coincidence, because I have a particular relationship with those numbers, at least up until that point, because I have like 12 years of experience having seen those numbers, and just those numbers would resonate with me like, yo, you're good. It's like a good omen, like, yo, these are your numbers. And sometimes, those numbers allude to my birthday, October 9th. So I'm like, hey, that's my birthday. That's what's up. Oh, yo. It's a good feeling and all. So for me, on the day that Nipsey was murdered, at least it seemed like that same day. It was, it was the next day for me, because I was thousands of miles away in another country. The time zone was different. So, but for the day that Nipsey was murdered, I have a memory of Nipsey and the numbers 109, and they are connected, right? So that's the first story. I've got two other stories like this. The second story occurred right here in Los Angeles at the Crete Academy on Crenshaw. There's a mural that's been drawn of Nipsey, and it's located on the basketball court on the playground. And one day I decided to drive by that academy. I wanted to look at that mural. I just drove down the street and I looked, and it was there, so I could see it. I didn't get out of the car, but I could see it, and I was like, all right, cool. I'm satisfied. I've seen it. But then there was something else that I noticed just adjacent to the school, the Crete Academy, right next to it. There's an apartment building, and the apartment building address is 6109. Can't make this up. So on the day that I noticed these two things, I said, wow, look, there's a mural of Nipsey and there's 109, like right there. And so I filed that away. I made a video about it, but I made a mental note. I'm like, wow, there it is again, Nipsey and 109. I'm like, that's interesting. And then the last story, the third story, I was in Sweden. I was in Stockholm, Sweden. And I was entering the museum, the Nobel Peace Prize Museum, when the cashier, I paid for my ticket. Well, she told me, hey, there's a tour beginning in about 15 minutes. You should join the tour. And she was a little insistent. She was like, you should really join the tour. It's a great tour. You should really join it. And I just said, okay, I'll join the tour. 15 minutes? She said, yeah. I said, all right, fine. So with the 15 minutes, I had that time to kill, I walked into the gift shop and I purchased 3 or 4 postcards. Very cheap, right? Cheap little gifts, little trinkets, little knickknacks. And after making that purchase, well, while I was making that purchase, I noticed that the cashier in the gift shop, I knew that she looked to be Ethiopian, of Ethiopian descent. She was a pretty brown-skinned woman. And she had some, I guess the phenotype, of an Ethiopian. And so at the end of the transaction, I said to her, thank you in the Ethiopian language of Amharic, which is Amesegenalo. I said that, but she told me, oh, I'm not Ethiopian. And I was like, what? You're not? Well, where are you from? And she said, I'm from Eritrea. Or some people, Eritrea. All right. And I was intrigued. I was like, oh, that was Nipsey's country. And I was like, did you know Nipsey Hussle? And she was like, of course I knew Nipsey. And then I was like, what did Nipsey mean to you? And then she went in, she was like, well, Nipsey was an Eritrean from my country, but he was a success in America. And she said he was like hope, and he was just a powerful person and very good dude. And I was like, all right, thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you. I wanted to get your perspective. I wanted to get the Eritrean perspective, which I did. And look at where I was. I was in Stockholm, Sweden, of all places. So that's just an example of how far Nipsey's influence, traveled. A global figure, right? I noticed that her boss or her coworkers were kind of off to the side watching us as we were having this conversation, sort of like, you do have other customers and you need to wrap that up, wrap that conversation up, because. So I was like, okay, yeah, I know you have to get back to work, but thank you for sharing that with me. And then I left. I left the gift shop, went into the lobby area where I had a few minutes to kill before the tour. And I was just thinking, man, I was able to talk to a real Eritrean all the thousands of miles away from Oman and even Los Angeles. And it was like we're just right at home. And that felt really good, to have that moment to talk about Nipsey. Well, within a few minutes of the tour beginning, I was standing about 8 feet away from a display. There were these 4 window panels behind which there were some artifacts, some, historic artifacts. And from where I was standing, I could clearly see there was a document behind the glass that had the number 109 written on it. So once again, I had a moment. This time I was in Stockholm, Sweden, but I had this moment where Nipsey and 109 were like right here. And they were associated and they matched. And I was like, this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. But you know what? It didn't dawn on me that I have these 3 moments where Nipsey and 109 match. That didn't dawn on me until today. Today, when I'm writing a book about these experiences, and I'm bringing everything together. So my next book, I'm working on it right now, and through the process, these 3 stories came to mind where Nipsey and 109 meet. So that's just something I noticed, something to talk about. Thank you for listening. There it is right there, 10-9. iSee109. All right, y'all. Peace and blessings.
You're at 109 right now.
Ichimaru-kyo. Iine.
C'est toujours un plaisir d'être là avec vous. Vous écoutez la fréquence 109. Merci à vous.
All right, so I'm here at the Nobel Prize Museum, right? Check it out. So I went into the museum shop, and I just purchased a few postcards, cheap, you know, souvenirs and whatnot. Some stamps as well, so I can mail them from here. The young woman, the cashier, looked like she was Habesha. And so instead of saying in Swedish, thank you, or even in English, I spoke to her in Amharic, which is the Ethiopian language. I said, Amesegen alo. Well, she told me, hey, I'm not Ethiopian. She said, I'm from Eritrea. And then I was like, oh, I'm sorry, you speak Tigrinya? She's like, yeah, dude. She's like, are you Ethiopian? I'm like, no. She's like, well, but you're learning about Ethiopia? And I'm like, check it out. So, do you know or do you remember Nipsey Hussle? She was like, of course. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about, right? So, I tell her that, you know, Nipsey had a big impact on me, and I've been spending my time learning more about, you know, Ethiopian, Eritrean culture ever since. So she was like, that's what's up. And we had a really good, you know, interaction thereafter. Before it was kind of like, you know, mechanical, just she was doing her job and I was, you know, answering questions as a customer. But then when we broke all of that down and broke out of that what is that called? That construct, and we just related to each other on a personal level based upon Nipsey, it was all love, it was all family, it was like, that's what's up. And I'm like, bro, Nipsey's impact, you know, I'm all the way in Sweden, you dig? And this is that kind of reception, you dig? So I can't even imagine what it was like to be Eritrean and to have had an experience, you know. What were the Eritreans, what did they see in Nipsey? Because he was just doing, woo, can't even imagine. And for me, a black American, you know, I get one perspective, but the Eritreans get a completely different one. So yes, that's what it is. Those blue and yellow lights, I think that is a recent installment in that's a reminder of the Ukraine. So that's what it is.
Because I always get a bit annoyed when I read like in media that this person was nominated. It's purely speculation, even if they like to portray it like they're sure, but it is speculation. It's never confirmed by the committees. So for example, Donald Trump saying he was nominated for the Peace Prize a couple of years ago, he was just guessing, there's no way of actually knowing. And in 50 years time we will know because they released the material. Yeah.
In the last display over here,
yeah.
I can't see it, but is that a number? Could you read that number to me, please?
The 1934 and 109.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's the number of the nominee. So they put a number. So that's nominee number 109. That's an interesting nomination letter, by the way, or it's a telegram, which was quite usual back in the days. It's a telegram nominating Kolfon Osiecki, another journalist. I think the first journalist to receive the Peace Prize. And he received the prize in 1934, as it says there. He was a German journalist who very early on reported, he wrote for a newspaper called Die Weltbühne, and he reported on Germany starting to arm up, which they weren't allowed to after World War I. And Hitler and what he was doing. So he was one of the first political prisoners in the concentration camps, and when he received the Peace Prize, he was still in the concentration camps. Hitler was very angry about this Nobel Prize. He forbade all German citizens to ever say yes to a Nobel Prize, and they did not let him out. He unfortunately died, I think, in 1938, so he wasn't able to come and receive his prize. And this is a fact for some of the peace laureates, that it's not the first time that somebody who is imprisoned received the Peace Prize. That does not mean that they don't get the prize, in the sense that usually the family still, or somebody from his family or somebody is able to come and receive the prize. If you officially decline the Nobel Prize, you don't get it, but you don't have to come here. So these are two different things. There were a lot of speculations a few years ago on Bob Dylan, who did not come here, but he never declined the prize, so he still got it. If you officially decline, that's happened 2 times only. The most, Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre was the most famous for the Literature Prize in 1964. And he said that as he had to explain himself to media who was asking, he said, as a writer, he wanted to be free and not connected to any prizes or prize awarding institutions. Since the decision that they make is always final, Jean-Paul Sartre is still mentioned in all the lists. We have him up there, but he says that he declined. So this means that they don't change their minds and say we'll give it to somebody else. The second was Le Duc Tho. Not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. During the Vietnam War, it was Henry Kissinger and Le Duc Tho, the 2 parties in the peace talks. They received the Peace Prize before the Vietnam War was over. So Le Duc Tho said, I cannot accept this prize because we haven't seen the result yet. And Henry Kissinger did not decline it, but I've heard rumors that he tried to kind of give it back after, because people criticized the fact that he did not decline it. But you can't, if you say yes to the prize, you can't change your mind afterwards and try to give it back either. So yeah, that was the second. And then there was also Boris Pasternak, who is kind of declined it in the sense